You're listening to the Psychic Coffee Shop Podcast Network.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Psychic Coffee Shop, and welcome to Mountain Bears. I'm Aeson, and of course, with me tonight is Techy Joe. How are you, darling?
Doing great. How about you?
Yeah, moving forward, as we always do. Well, it finally seems like the Ecuadorians are now free of their house guests. It only took forever. For those that don't know...
Yeah.
Go for it, dear.
Oh, I was just going to say that, you know, the house guest since 2010, 2012? Like, how long?
2010.
Oh, no. London. The Ecuadorian embassy in London. Since 2012, over the rape in Sweden. He's been on the run since 2010.
Yes.
Oh, it's hard to keep up with this one. It's just crazy.
Well, it's been a long story that we've been following. For those who will remember Julian Aeson, founder and owner of WikiLeaks. For those who don't know, WikiLeaks has done some really bad things. A lot of people think that, he released the emails from Hillary Clinton and he released the Democratic caucus emails. Yes, that's been the latest news. That's not been all that he's done. All the way back to 2011, WikiLeaks leaked personal information of, gays, positive people, rape victims, in the places they live where they could be killed. Basically handed Saudi Arabia a hit list and said, here, go get these.
Well, and a large part of this that you really have to take into consideration is that as it started, it kind of came across as, okay, we're going to release, we're creating WikiLeaks, we're going to release information that in a way would be things that the public would want to know without necessarily, calling people by name, putting them in harm's way, that kind of thing. And then it just kind of kept getting crazier and crazier. And then we end up with the release of documents that outed people, and it's just gone straight downhill. And I think one of the most chilling quotes comes from the article from Plus Magazine, which is an HIV-positive publication. And he basically just outright says he did it for the fun of it. That taking down Hillary Clinton's campaign was intentional, and he didn't want to see her as president, and he kind of did it for the fun of it. Like, he wasn't really throwing his support behind Trump. He just plainly didn't care.
Right. And plainly, was basically not even caring about our national security. Our national security. Didn't care about the people living in Saudi Arabia, who is under oppression, who, it's penalty of death to be who you are born naturally. It's penalty of death over there for a lot of things. They are killing a lot of people.
Yes, very much so they are.
Yeah. Beheading is like a weekly event there. And that's been the area there for years now. But, this is ridiculous. And then he runs to a little country embassy and screams, asylum, asylum. It's really?
And but at that point, he's kind of done some globetrotting to get to the point where he ends up at the Ecuadorian embassy. Because he first ended up in Sweden, and that was kind of rocking well for him until he was accused of rape. I'm not going to outright just call it he raped someone, but he was accused of rape. And they're exploring now that he is out of the Ecuadorian embassy's protection and has been extradited, trying to restart that case before the statute of limitations runs out in August 2020. But it's one of those situations. He bounced around all over the place. Then he started claiming he had no further connection with WikiLeaks. But then turn around and it's kind of looking like he still does. But it's been one of those stories that just keeps popping up. It just can't get weirder. And then, yes, it does. Yes, it does. It just gets weirder again. But yeah, it's left a lot of people scratching their heads, especially those who are very into this freedom of information concept. That we've gone beyond freedom of information. You're literally putting people's lives at risk needlessly. Which kind of leaves you with that moment of when you have gone so far that you're now ticking off your supporters, maybe you've just gone way too far. Like this should have ended long before now. But it's just kept going, and it seemed, very much like there just wasn't gonna be an end to it. Thankfully, that's finally happened.
Hopefully,
at least in this regard. I'm a big fan of freedom of information, and also the rights of people to protect their information. I see that as not necessarily being mutually exclusive. But there's a line there. There's a line in between what should be public and what should not be public. And that's often with information a very strong balancing act. And for him, it seems to have less to do with freedom of information than just getting revenge, and it's a giant game. It's sport. It's trophy hunting. Who can I take down this time?
What can I do this time? And you see that sometimes in hiker communities, and this isn't even that. I mean, I would be, I'm one that has said that we lost privacy the day the first, AOL dial tone occurred. Yes, I can still hear that sound. Thought about making it a ringtone sometimes. But, there are some things that I'm against, in my view, forcing information out. If it is information that you want to share, then share it. That's your choice to do so. But for someone to go into, someone else's, to break systems, to put other people's lives in danger. Yeah, I have a big issue there.
Well, and not to mention,
Okay.
things like outing someone's, sexual orientation, especially in countries where that carries a death penalty, and as well as, HIV status and things like that. But that's also been a bigger scope topic, just because we've also faced the flip side challenge. On one hand, if you're John Q. Public, you're out there, you're on the streets, you're totally disconnected. As in, you go to work, you go home, you repeat. You're not creating policy, you're not doing things that affect the lives of thousands of people, millions of people, etc., that there's a certain expected level, a expectation of privacy to an extent for sexuality, for medical conditions and medical diagnoses and medications and things like that. We have a ton of laws around at least medication and HIPAA primarily, but at the same time, you also run into this backlash version, which was an even bigger issue, or has been almost a bigger issue, in terms of, but if you're sitting here and you're running around as someone in the closet, and you have your nice little Midwest constituents, and you're running around, in the Republican Party, and you're supporting, pro-choice pro-life, anti-gay, blah, 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 laws, you're making those policies, or you're upholding those policies, while at the same time you're running around and, either, claiming family values while screwing around on your wife and knocking up your mistress and then forcing her to get an abortion, or you're, going to sex clubs and things like that and hooking up with guys. Where does that limit lie? That's been a big deal, trying to figure out, on the flip side, when is it okay to out someone? Like, at what level of hypocrisy and harm to others do you go, screw this? Like, I can respect your right to privacy up to a point, but at the same time, how much of an expectation of privacy should we even have to begin with? Those have been battling concepts. And that even stretches into Facebook and the conversations we've had on it. Because you also turn around and you have people that are like, I have nothing to hide. I'm just going to put everything out there. I don't care. Name, address, social security number, credit card numbers. I don't care. Some of that may be just simple lack of understanding, misguided, and some of that may be they really don't care how much information you have about them. And then I can go one more level and go, and then there's the other side of this. Like, this is a multifaceted issue.
It is.
From working with debt collections once upon a time, the amount of information you can buy about a human being for a quarter, 50 cents, $1.50, cheap, bulk rate information to sit there and take someone who has an account. You have a name, an address, a social security number, a phone number, and potentially like employment information like that already coming from the client. And then you can turn around and pay a service, and they will send you tons of information. Estimates of what they make per year, estimated neighborhood home values, list of property and assets, existence of bank accounts, credit cards, credit scores, on down the line, you can get a ton of information for gumball prices. Literally, gumball or Coke machine prices.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is where all of this kind of crashes together. This is the giant intersection, is when you have someone like Julian who's going around and kind of completely upsetting this apple cart. Not that he's using their services, but knowing that on some level that information is going to filter back in. Because these are data brokers. This is what they do.
Right.
They buy information. They scour for information any which way they can get it, and then they sell it to companies to collect your debts, to determine whether or not to give you life insurance, to determine whether or not to give you whatever. This is the kind of information, it's not just a credit score. It's not just a number, like give them credit or not, or, any of the other scores that these companies can create. It's absolutely amazing to me, the volume of information you can find out about people.
Right.
And yet we still go one step further. We browse the internet and we collect even more information to the point that you end up, with, say, Amazon being able to predict you're pregnant before you know it. So trying to have this conversation gets really struggling as to we don't have any boundaries. We really don't.
Well, and we don't even create those boundaries ourselves. About, what we will not, how we will. We don't even think about it. Because we, until, you have to go, okay, what is my privacy level? Where do I want things to be at? How do I want to talk and think about this? You have to reach a certain level of something in your career. For me, it was Walmart. The first time I walked into Walmart and someone walked up behind me and said, "Hey, Aeson, what are you doing here? I didn't think I'd see you here," is when I started looking at it going, well, guess I won't be leaving the house looking like a mess and a half anymore.
Well, there is that. Well, but there's also a consideration there. Because to an extent, yes, at a certain part of your career, you do start to potentially go, oh my God, how much is out there and what can I do about it? But there's also just the sheer fact that we don't have any guidelines for businesses or data brokers about what information they can and cannot have.
No.
Even if you sit there and go, hey, wait a minute, this is too much. In the U.S., you don't have any control over that. Other countries have been trying to give their citizens that power back. Say, hey, wait a minute. I don't want you knowing this about me. I don't want you sharing this about me. I don't want you being able to use that. This is mine.
Right.
I own me. I'm not just a chunk of data in a database. I'm a human being. You don't own my information. And that's led to some interesting things, the biggest of which is the bane of many people's existence, that lovely little cookie notice every time you go on a web page. That for a lot of sites you have to agree to, or else goodbye. There's nothing you can do on the site. It breaks the site. But which is kind of like you have the option to opt out, except you don't. Like if you absolutely have to use this resource, you don't have an option to opt out. So it's like a false sense of control there. But as for the U.S., we haven't even tried. We keep, like, there are very well-paid lobbyists who have done everything humanly possible to keep that exchange of information free and open. But then turn around and someone like Julian Assange comes along and publishes the information of the wrong people, air quotes around wrong people, then we suddenly have this moment of, oh, you can't do that, but technically you can. He didn't publish lies. We have slander and libel if you publish lies, you know, if you repeat them or if you publish them. We have slander and libel for that if it's bad information or intentionally misleading information or defamatory information that is not without merit. But we have nothing that truly covers telling the truth. Truth you shouldn't have access to, truth you shouldn't know about, truth that you shouldn't be able to just go copy and paste. Here it is. There's not a lot controlling that.
Still, a lot of places collect information and we don't even think about it. Apps collect information all the time. Not only where you're located, what you're doing, what your thoughts are. They collect your birthday. They collect your mailing address. They collect, you know. And I'm like, why does, I don't know, Facebook, or better yet, Marlboro. They have a lovely new coupon app. You know, you get rewards for Marlboro points. You know, the same thing they used to before. Well, when you go to fill the app out, they want your name, your birthday, your mailing address, your 2 alternate phone numbers, what brand of cigarettes you smoke, what store you normally go to. What are they doing with this data? How much encryption have they put into this data? Their little 6-digit code to get access to, is it needed? I mean, is that, 6 digits? There ain't that many combinations of 6 digits when you have that person's information that you can't crack the password.
Well, true, but that's only access to one account. Then there's the flip side of it is what self-imposed regulations are they following to protect that data once they have it? And realistically, how much of a requirement is there actually sitting there? Because technically the information they're asking for would fall under the category of directory information. It basically, technically, in many cases, your birth date, your name, your address, that is typically all considered directory information. You know, it kind of harkens back to the concept of being able to call, or dial the operator, call 411, that kind of information. It's the same thing you can do with white pages. That's not necessarily the biggest concern. But because, that's one level where it's like, this is weird. This is really weird. Like, that seems like a lot of data just to get coupons. But, again, people will exchange very, very little to give out a lot of data. To many people, $1 or whatever off a pack or a carton or whatever it is that you're getting as a coupon, regardless of the company, you'll sit there and give up a lot of information about you, about your choices, about the things you're interested in, survey apps, are another great example. The free products, people will give up a lot. At one point, it was found that the majority of people in a company would give up their password for as little as a candy bar. Like, here's my password. Corporate systems, major data, or very, sensitive corporate data accessible to them, they'd give up their business password for a candy bar.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's everything you've got to do. That's part of it, but there's also another point to that, which basically boils down to, then you have the information, you don't even realize why you're being asked. But we've all been trained to fill out forms. We've been doing it since we could write our own names. At least anyone without a helicopter parent. You've been filling out forms for years, all the way through education system. You assume if you're handed a form, you must fill it all out. Why else would there be a form? And that became a big issue with doctors' offices. Doctors' offices found a great way to make a little side money. Throw one more form in there. And many of them were labeled things like getting to know you, or, a personality profile so that we can better serve you. It was crap. The doctor didn't care how many books you read a week, or, how often you went on vacation, or none of that. None of that did they care about, other than they collected those forms, mailed them to a company, I'm sure got paid by the page, and that was used as marketing data. You went to a doctor's office, you assumed they needed to know the information, you gave up the information, not realizing down on the form in little baby print was the thing where you were opting into, this, that, and everything else.
Well, not only that, but it's interesting. Now they ask you, do you wear sunglasses? It's like, huh? What do you mean, do I wear sunglasses? What's that got to do with anything? But it's not the doctor, it's the insurance that's requiring it. Yeah. So it's not the doctor making the money. It's the insurance that we're already paying for.
Well, yeah. Well, and there's a side version of those, too. I've noticed those coming through on also the insurance side. Is you do see some of those, like, this is really weird. This seems like, this seems a little invasive. Yeah. It's like, that seems like an odd question. But, we're taught to fill out forms. We fill out the forms. We assume that if we don't fill out the forms, and it may be possible that, if you don't fill out the forms at the doctor's office, then you don't get seen by the doctor. And if you don't fill out the forms for every single, T crossed, I dotted for your insurance company, you may not have insurance. And I actually, in taking care of my grandmother, we went through a situation where they had sent this really stupid form in that I had forgotten to return. I did. I totally forgot to return it. I had filled one out the previous year, sent it in. It was a bunch of really stupid questions. And they called it something like a verification of whatever. And it sounded very official and important, and it was an entire, booklet of really stupid questions. Things that how does this influence her insurance? How? How does this change anything for you? And more importantly, I just filled this out last year. Why?
Right.
Filled it out, laid it to the side, got distracted. I think it was the year that I moved my office like 3 times in the house. And ended up, we get this letter in the mail, you haven't returned this form. So, effective immediately, your insurance coverage is suspended.
Mm-hmm.
This was supplemental, of course. She had Medicare. But the supplemental, through my grandfather's former employer, was suspended. And I'm sitting here going, how is that even legit? How can you require me to fill out such a stupid form and hinge the insurance on it? I mean, come on.
And it's like, really?
But then again,
is that 50 cents that important?
Yeah. Not only is there that, but in addition, for the most part of it, it's also, we're just surrounded by really stupid forms. One of my least favorites, or the one I absolutely complained about, my grandmother got a jury summons. Whole list of things that you could be excused for, or blah, blah, blah. The first time we get this, yes, you can elect, if you're over 70, to not participate. But there's no explanation how you do that. So I called the courthouse, and I'm like, okay, what you want us to do here? Like, I don't understand. And effectively, it became a thing of, oh, yeah, just disregard it. And I'm like, no. There's a whole section on the form about what happens if I disregard it. Give me another option. Okay. So turn around, and I swear to God, it was maybe 18 months later, another one comes in for her. And this time, it was better. They had a clearly marked section to fill out if the person say, has dementia or just flat out doesn't want to do it and they're over 70. I think it was 70.
Right.
Okay, great. Filled it out, mailed it in, life's good. And then my grandmother passes. Yet again, stupid form shows up. You're required to return it. Great big penalties of law, language, blah, blah, blah. But there's nothing to do if the person they've summoned to jury duty happens to be deceased. There's nowhere on the form to mark deceased and mail it back. You'd think the courthouse would know. We filed everything, the probate, all of that at the courthouse. Why am I having to deal with a jury summons? So again, all back up there. Hi, I have another one of your stupid forms in my hand. Look, she's deceased. What do I do? Oh, just disregard it. Oh, no. We've already had this conversation. There's great big language about disregarding it and mail tampering and all that crap. Give me another option. What do I do? Well, you can mark deceased on it and mail it back. I said, you don't need a copy of the death certificate? I would think you could go down the hall and get it. Actually, I'd like to know why you don't already know that. Well, we pulled the information for potential jurors in January. Well, my grandmother was still living in January. So, of course, she got on the voter, and registered to vote, all that. And no one's cross-checking. They just pull it once a year and just keep pulling names out of the hat. I'm like, you have a massive population over 65. Do you think you might want to, check this? Just every once in a while? Maybe before you waste a bunch of postage? Because have you seen our obituary page? Just for that county alone, It's a long one. It's sometimes a couple of pages.
Right.
You know,
well, I think I brought this up to you that I should probably. Right. You know, I think I brought this up to you last election. I think I probably should go and see how they voted in the last election.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's been dead for now 2 elections.
Mm-hmm.
One a state and one a federal.
Mm-hmm.
His name is still above mine in the books. And every year I go through and go, that man's dead. You got this death certificate. What's the problem? Oh, well, they'll update it eventually.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem to follow any rhyme or reason, but yet that information's printed, that information's in the book. They're perfectly happy if someone claiming to be that person walks in, signs their name. And they even give you a lovely example of it right above where you sign. You know, that's always been the kicker to me. Like, wow, like really, you can't have a separate verification book? You know, I would think you'd want to separate that. Like, if you're going to sit here and tell me that this is, you know, to ensure the you know, accuracy and quality, that, you know, there's no voter fraud. If you're going to sit there and tell me this crap, at least bother to try.
Right.
Like, seriously. But on the same token, like, this is the line I walk. On the same token, I do not agree with mass purging of voter records based on poor criteria. I do not support it. Like, I'm totally about when in doubt, provisional ballot. Just provisional ballot. Just don't even get into the argument. I don't like the concept of voter ID because it does disenfranchise a lot of people from voting. There are so many people, especially in the state, that, and typically the situation is dude loses his license for DUI, cannot afford the penalties and fees to go reestablish, and then ends up continuing to use his dead license, not to drive, but as identification, even past its expiration. And so there are a lot of people, their only form of identification is an expired license that they can't even, you know, that's no longer valid anyway. And they're now so far removed out of this, the process that it doesn't matter. You know, they willingly just gone, okay, I can't drive. I'm not allowed to. So what can you do to me? Refuse to sell me beer and cigarettes? I'll go somewhere else. I'll send the wife in. I'll send the girlfriend, the boyfriend, the whoever to go buy my beer and cigarettes. I don't care. Because ultimately, just getting an ID card is not a priority for people who don't drive. It's only a priority when you can go to jail for driving, you know, on an expired license, or you can be ticketed. Whatever. I've never been in a situation. I don't know what the final outcome of that one is, but ultimately, you remove the carrot from the stick. You remove the carrot. Like, they don't have a license to drive. It's just identification. You took the carrot off the stick. Why would you go, one, arrange transportation to go to the DMV to get a identification card that I believe the state's still charging like $10 a pop for?
Yep.
You know, like, that's an all-day journey for some people.
Well, not only that, but all the other documentation is now required for it.
Well, especially with that. And especially when you're going in with an expired driver's license process.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Throw a few more things in there, like, well, I don't know where my birth certificate is, and, well, I don't have any utilities in my name, and, well, or
mm-hmm.
the situation where you were born out of state, and, again, you don't have a driver's license, and there's a fair number of, while there are other options, there's a fair number of courthouses that really hate giving out copies of birth certificates, for good reason,
mm-hmm.
but giving out copies of birth certificates unless you stand there and prove who you are and why you need that. Again, for good reason.
Well,
When it
because they'll make mistakes on them.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
There's that too. But no, it's just we get so used to filling out forms, we get so used to the concept that there's some kind of oversight to this data, when clearly there's not. And when oversight occurs, it usually occurs not to the boon of the people, but to the boon of politicians. People going through and purging voter rolls in, say, black communities, or
mm-hmm.
any community of color, or any community they think, might vote for the other candidate, to abuse that power, to keep their party in charge, by mass disenfranchising voters because, say, they didn't vote in the last election, or their age is they're too old. We think they died. There's been a lot of creative versions of this, and it all leads to the same thing. Disenfranchise, keep as many people from voting as humanly possible, make it as hard to vote as humanly possible, and then, we were trying to prevent voter fraud. Not what it is. You had all the tools to verify this voter. You had all the tools, and you willingly got rid of those.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but, the same office that controls voting registration, voting records, is the same office, at least in this county, that you have to turn in the death certificate. You have to turn in the will. You have to go in there 3 or 4 times, at least, because they only give you one death certificate.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hello, I'm here to get to register a death certificate. Okay, well, let's go and check voters. They have to check their birth record.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't they check their death record?
Mm-hmm.
In their voting record.
Mm-hmm.
And what gets me, is things like the Social Security cards, Social Security numbers. They were never meant, ever, to be ID. Ever.
Nope.
Never, ever, ever. It's actually against federal law to be ID. But every governmental institute you go to, do you have your Social Security card?
Mm-hmm. What's your account number or your social? And that it runs rampant. But tying it all backwards a little bit, this is what they do with the data. Effectively, they're doing whatever they want to with the data. They're using it solely for their purposes. Nothing in this represents people and what people would want done with their data, with how they would want their data handled, with what methodologies they would prefer an intelligent entity do to, say, clear the voter rolls of the deceased and clear the voter rolls of, people who are incompetent or have been arrested or, and haven't, regained voting rights. It's just throwing pus at a wall and seeing what they can get by with. Like, what'll stick? What can we sneak by them this year?
Right.
And these are the same people that we're also trusting to maintain not only the integrity of that data, but to also not use that data in any other compromising way, such as, selling voter information, selling birth certificates online, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because ultimately you have to ask the question. There are, and especially, and this may be a hotter topic, but in issues of undocumented immigrants, people who come to this country and have not, immigrated, and received a Social Security number, et cetera, they're still working. These offices end up with a Social Security number, date of birth, birth certificate on file for them, so that the company, not the person, but the company, is able to look like they're paying their fair share of taxes and contributing the right amount for FICA and, doing all, dotting all their I's and crossing all their T's. And you got to wonder, where does this where do these documents come from? No one pulls this out of thin air.
Right.
No one pulls it out of thin air. This comes from, ultimately, intelligently, the next logical person this comes from is rogue county clerks, people who are employed to handle and manage this information, these books of documents. How much? How much does it cost to get a packet? Name, a name, a Social Security number, and a birth certificate, so you can illegally employ a person under a false identity, solely to dot your I's and cross your T's with the federal government. How much? What is the candy
it's $1,500
bar of cost?
Well,
there you go.
Yeah. But that's assuming that they can get it correct. Literally. These county governments, they don't hire, there isn't a specialist like a historian or an anthropologist or, I don't know, anybody with a master's degree. We saw that with Kim Davis. They don't hire top of the class to keep
in some areas you don't have a top of the class.
Correct. There isn't laws that require people to do their jobs.
There's certainly not that.
And see, that's where, government fails. In general.
Well, and it does. Any system that does not start with a question of what is the worst action someone could take with that. Like when you're sitting there looking at a database, whether it's on paper or it's in a pretty file on a server or wherever it may reside, anytime you don't look at a giant collection of data, or what will potentially be a giant collection of data, and go, what's the worst thing that can happen? What is the worst thing that can happen if we show full credit card numbers? What's the worst thing that can happen if we identify people by Social Security number? What's the worst that can happen? If you do not start with that question, and then further go to the employment level, HR, this is an HR question you need to ask. What's the worst thing an employee can do with our data? What is the worst thing? Like, and I don't mean for the company. I mean literal, moral, imperative. What is the worst thing someone who has no morals, no scruples, is in it for the money, can walk in our door and walk back out with? What's the worst that can happen? If you do not ask that question, if you do not plan for that situation, if you do not take the steps to identify those areas of potential problem and plan for it, this is what happens. You have massive. You have identifying documents for sale, and sometimes easier to get than if you legitimately go to get it.
Right, but it doesn't even have to be identifying documents. We run into this with my business all the time, and I keep having to, because CRM or whatever you want to call it, I'll call it busy work for your advisors. These companies keep wanting to put it in there. Keep it on our database, fill in, notes on your call so you can remember your client and remember what you talked about. No, I'm sorry. I have continue to refuse to use that system, continue to refuse this, because I know how to get into my account, and I know where everything gets stored. And I know, that these companies, some of the stuff that I'll talk about with my clients, it's WikiLeaks level. Do we really want to know what some of my clients are doing? No. Do I really want my clients to have that vulnerability of feeling like, he might take a note that, I'm sleeping with my boss, and then, someone get a hold of that information, and, then, now that, someone has that information, they can go and, extort my boss for this Fortune 500 company. Yeah.
Yeah, sell it to your spouse who wants to divorce you and needs leverage. Or, the possibilities there for all the things that can go wrong. Those are, in some ways, the most benign ones. But those are the most outward-facing. That directly affects your client. Then there's another level of that, because then there's the level at which you become affected. And essentially, you take enough CRM, for those who don't know, it's customer relationship management. And the business concept is you want every interaction to be seamless. That all you literally need your client to say when they get on the phone or they send you an email or whatever, you just need a name and a company or a name to know, this is, Jane Doe, she works at blah, 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 and this is, all our past interactions with her, and, then you can, then there's the information that gets put in those, and those are developed to be very, very, very personal. At least in terms of, there's room for spouse names and kids' names and anniversaries. And so you can sit there and just spout out random things to more personalize that conversation and make your client feel like a friend or make them think you have superhuman memory capability. And in doing so, while it can be very beneficial for businesses to an extent, and it's very beneficial. As great as that is, it also means anyone who answers email or answers phone calls at that company has access to that information. Where this can really become a problem and it blows back in people's faces, you put that information in, now the next person knows just as much about this client as you do. You're now a dime a dozen. They can replace you so quickly, so easily, so seamlessly. And meanwhile, when you start talking about a field like psychic advisor, you potentially open that client up to horrendous abuse by an advisor who doesn't know what they're doing, but they can read the notes in CRM and they can make it sound like they're very clairvoyant. They know everything about it. No. The last advisor you spoke to updated your file, and they're just spouting stuff off. That's all it is. It's smoke and mirrors. It's the same as if you call into, let's say, you call into Joe's Plumbing Service, and they're able to, drop out, oh, your birthday was last week. Happy birthday. That's not something that should endear you to them. That's information that should scare you.
Right.
Because they're manipulating. They're storing information to manipulate your feelings towards that company, and they're doing it in a way that all of their employees become a dime a dozen as long as they fill out that form. But that's what we're trained to do.
Yep. Very much so. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Let's take a break and we'll come back.
Do you like a little more grrr with your coffee? Then tune in to Mountain Bears here on Blog Talk on Friday nights at 9 p.m. for the latest in LGBT topics, current events, and technology. Every Friday night, we'll be here. Join us as the Mountain Bears explore these topics and more.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hi, welcome. Relax. Have a cup of your favorite topics with your host, Aeson Knight. There's nothing like a good conversation to warm your soul and give your spirit a break now and then. Aeson have such a wonderful way of exploring topics like psychic phenomena, important topics in our daily lives from a psychic's point of view, and you never know who else will stop by. Live on Blog Talk Radio. So come on in. We made a fresh cup of Java just for you.
Hi, I'm Rain.
And this is Raven Wind, and we're the Feather and Bone Podcast, two witches talking about everything witchy and nothing at all. We consider ourselves to be energy-based spiritualists, non-traditionalists, and decidedly not Wiccan. Our views on magic and life in general don't align with other pagans in the community, but we have a live and let live outlook on life. So if you want to learn something new while laughing a whole lot, you can find links to our podcast, Facebook page, products, and purchase tarot readings at featherandbone.net.
As a busy modern woman, I'm constantly on the go. Having to make multiple stops while I'm out shopping or getting things done just doesn't work for me. That's why I love going to the Crystal Lotus shop for every one of my metaphysical needs. They have all the basics like stones, candles, sage, plus they carry jewelry, herbs, cards, a variety of unique gifts, and several other items you're probably looking for. Uh-oh, sounds like my husband's old college injury flared up again. That's okay. I can count on the team of healers at the Crystal Lotus to fix him right up. They offer massage, Reiki, Kalamni, as well as other energy modalities, all performed by licensed, highly trained, and gifted practitioners. And while he's being taken care of, I'll sit down and get some guidance by one of their accomplished psychic readers. Oh, and did I mention they do custom orders and have gift certificates as well? They even offer yoga several days a week for all levels of experience. Plus, the last Saturday of every month they have Psychic Saturday, where they offer discounts on readings as well as mini healing sessions. Stop in to meet Shauna and the rest of the family there. They're located at 89 Old Main Plaza in St. Albans, where the Loop Pharmacy used to be, or give them a call at 304-729-8055. Crystal Lotus, taking the spirit where the body cannot go.
You're listening to the Psychic Coffee Shop Podcast Network. Choosing a psychic is hard, and you don't want to waste time finding one that's right for you. You've thought about calling into the show, but you want more privacy than that? With services from phone, email, chat, text, and his network availability, you need to check out Aeson's website at aesonnight.com. Just a few clicks and you can have your own personal, private psychic reading. On aesonnight.com, you can also find out about VIP packages, scheduling parties and events, and signing up for his classes. What are you waiting for? Talk to Aeson today. Oh, hey there. Sorry, we're just wrapping up the planning for Beltane in the Forest 2019. And let me tell you, it's been a struggle trying to figure out where to put all the vendors, performers, and activities. You're coming out on May 19th, right? What's that? You didn't know that you were invited? Bring the kids, spouse, bring everyone. Yes, that's right. Starting at 11:30 a.m., we have adult and children's activities, a barding circle, and of course you know Gypsy Rhythm is going to be there. Coonskin Park in Charleston, West Virginia. Look, I've got to go, but you can find out more on our website, beltaneintheforest.org. See you there.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for paying the power bill. All right, so, information's highly important to me. The privacy of my clients' information's highly important. It's some weird things people ask you about their information. Do you know the number of times I've had to explain to clients that no, I cannot see your credit card number, so I can't read it back to you. I will not store your credit card number on premises. In my head, I'm like, why would I do that?
Yes. Well, actually, ran into a situation with my last employer where they had this lovely antiquated system that stored credit card numbers, and it was meant to do recurrent billing. So you owe this money, you're going to pay it off. We can keep billing this one credit card. No one ever thought, until way too many years down the road, about maybe the people on that are sitting there with this account information popping in front of them. Maybe they don't need to see the whole credit card number, the date of expiration, the security code on the back of the card. Maybe that's not something they should be able to just randomly pop into. Maybe that's information they should be taking, plugging into the system, verifying while they're on the phone with the client or with the debtor, and then it gets locked out. But it was a thing no one had thought about, even after they had removed or only left the last four digits of a credit card number on a receipt. this system would sit there and show you the full credit card number. And it's one of those mind-boggling things, especially when you consider at the same time, you're looking at this account information, and from an entry-level employee all the way up to IT and everyone in between, all the way to top-level executive in the company. Name, address, social security number, date of birth, any payment on file. So credit card number or account number and routing number for checking. All of it. Totally visible in that system. Totally visible. No one ever stopped. It didn't occur to anyone until PCI. What is the rest of that? Payment card information, PCI PA? Payment Card Information Protection Act, whatever that was. The new standards for PCI, or for payment card information storage, came into effect, I think that was around 2008, if memory serves me correctly. No one even thought about this until suddenly it was a requirement. If you're going to accept credit cards, you can't have that data readily accessible. And then someone thought, maybe we ought to do the same thing with Social Security numbers. Maybe we should do the same thing with, routing an account number. Should you think? Security is one of those things that always gets me. It's, again, it all stems back to the no one ever stopped and asked the question, what's the worst thing that could happen if someone who shouldn't have this information gets their hands on it? Seems like a simple question. Seems like one you would want to ask.
Well, it's like, the drug dealer from your last place of work.
That was fun. Loved hearing about that one. Yes. Well, yeah, that was a fun one too. Though I think you might be referencing a different story from there. And yeah, that was the one who literally kept a file on his desk, pen and paper, nothing high tech, pen and paper. And every time he talked to a client, or to a debtor, I worked IT, so I'm more used to the client side of it, which would be the company that was the creditor. So client flies out of my mouth. But from the debtor side, every time he talked to a debtor that either had a super high balance that they were paying off like it was, a bar tab, or accounts where a debtor just flat out said something that keyed him in that, hey, this person's got money. He'd that information. He'd just sit there and write it down. And what he did is over time, he kept this little pad going of all this information. And then he, quite apparently, picked a month. And as he's going through, he starts running, he would talk to an account like they're supposed to. Talk to someone who owes money on an account. They'd tell him to get lost, go fly off a bridge, whatever. Long walk, short pier. I ain't paying it. And he'd go, okay. And then he'd keep the call open. And he'd go over to the payment screen. And he'd take his little pad and he'd pick one at random and plug it in. He had slowly, methodically, meticulously planned this out. And he spent an entire month doing this. And we get to the end of the month. This guy is looking like the golden child. Highest collections ever. Big, fat, juicy commission check. And they are so excited. And our company was so short-sighted in this situation. Never did it occur to someone. We need to make sure that before we pay a commission like that, or any commission, that all those payments are going to clear because they're using end-of-month closeout data. They got so excited. They wanted to do this great big floor show thing where they pull all of us into one room and, cheers and hurrah, and here's your commission check, and they had the great big, paper or the great big whiteboarded one. Celebrate the dude for this outstanding achievement. And he took that check and he walked out of the building at the end of the day. He cashed his check and we never saw him again. Monday morning, this was a Friday, or I think a Friday, maybe a Thursday, something like that. He gets his check. He doesn't show up for work the next day or the next. No one can get a hold of him. No one knows where he is. No one has seen or heard from him. He is a no-call, no-show. He is about to get fired after just being celebrated. And everyone's panicking, like, what the heck is going on with this dude? Legitimately concerned, is he dead? Like, did he, go out and celebrate too much and end up in a ditch? Like, what's going on here? And then the phone call started. I don't know who you are, but you charged my credit card over $50,000. Phone call. One after another. Angry people. Whose information he had written down and whose credit cards and checking accounts were hit for tons of money. Just the calls kept rolling in. And that's when, after a few of those, the company starts to realize something's wrong here. And oh, dear God, it's the same. Like, it wasn't just like he used a card once and went, okay, not going to use that one again. He ran 3, 4 more transactions on one account. Like one person whose information he had pay off multiple debts with it.
Right.
So, one, it took a while to find this. 2, once it was found, there's the sudden realization he skipped town.
Right.
The company just celebrated him out on the floor one day. He didn't show up the next. Should have been our first clue. Like, did anyone watch the movie Psycho? Anyone? Anyone watch Psycho? And then turn around and we figure this out. He embezzled he embezzled corporate funds, but ultimately he planned this. This was a malicious act to cash out. He abused every loophole he could find to get a great big payday, or as big as that place would give, a great big payday, just enough to look impressive, but not enough to arouse suspicion immediately, and walk out the door with the money.
Right.
Check's already cleared. Money's already gone. We're having to refund money left, right, and center. We're having to apologize left, right, and center. We're having to salvage this situation. And they ended up doing things like paying overdraft charges. So it's not just the money he took that he shouldn't have from these people's accounts, but then the things that he inadvertently caused. Like someone's car payment is late. Someone's mortgage payment is late. Irate people because they can't feed their kid. That kind of stuff starts happening. And he's gone. He's nowhere to be found.
Mm-hmm.
And there's egg all over everyone's face
Mm-hmm.
simply because no one stopped and asked some very key important questions. What's our checks and balances? What are we doing to verify that these payments are going to clear? What are we doing to keep ourselves from being taken on a very wild ride?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of companies don't. Like, I don't say this to go, the company I used to work for was so stupid. That's not what this is about. It's that it is so easy to sit and assume the best of actions. That you're going to hire people and they're just going to do the thing you hired them to do, and they're going to do it ethically, responsibly, intelligently, with no malice. Every single day, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So you never
That ain't how
stop
it works.
and think from the mindset. Yeah, that's not going to be everyone who walks through the door. Now, will that be the majority? Very likely that can be your majority that walk through the door. But then it just takes one to take you on a very wild, crazy, through-the-looking-glass journey that does. It threatens every part of you. That you feel stupid and taken advantage of, and, why didn't we catch this? And anger, resentment. It's all of those things in one moment.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look in the mirror and you're like, we didn't ask the question. What if someone didn't want to play by the rules? What if someone just wanted to come in here and take advantage of us? We never stop to ask. What if it all fails? What is our check and balance so that this doesn't all blow up in our face? He found it. He sat there. He watched. He figured it out. He found every loophole in the system, and he stacked them together and abused every single one of them. And that happens with a lot of companies. And what ultimately occurs, as bad as that situation is for the immediate part of it, is this is an employee we trusted at least enough to work there and have access to these things. As much as that is just a slap in the face, then there's the exponential cost that it's not just what he did wrong and fixing what he did wrong. It's trying to make it whole. Because this isn't just, you took my $100, give it back. Oh, here you go, here's $100, we're so sorry. That was my mortgage payment. Now they're threatening to foreclose on my house. Or they can. I could lose my house over this. I could lose my car over this. Now I have a credit problem because of this, because now I have late payments on my gas and my electric and my water and my sewer and my trying to fix that is where suddenly it's not just what they did wrong, it's now a bottomless pit for a while. And so you still have that anger and resentment towards them for doing it in the first place, and then you have this whole, when will this stop? Because it's like a dam bursting. When you start the dawning realization what just happened, it is a dam burst moment. You are overwhelmed by this isn't going to just be, he got a $5,000 or whatever, however much it was. Let's just call it a $5,000 commission check, walked out the door, which represented so many thousands of dollars in income that and a chunk of that was not money he should have gotten, but money that the company should have gotten. It's not just putting it back like, we're so sorry, sorry, hand in the cookie jar, I'll drop the cookie. It's now you have to go build a factory to make a whole lot more cookies. Because you can put back the cookies that the company's holding and go, here you go, we're so sorry. But now you have this void to fill that's going to keep screaming, and it's horrible, and it's horribly unfair. And in their head, I'm sure it's a concept, the sheer volume at that moment of potential Better Business Bureau complaints and lawsuits, fees, and the cost, and the time, and the attorney's fees, and the just explodes in one's brain when you realize you were that vulnerable to a specific attack. And you realize the number of times people don't ask that question, and they don't. They just don't. And that's where you get left, is it's never going to just be this, like, oh, your hand, we caught someone's hand in the cookie jar, put it back. There's going to be opportunity costs. There are going to be, so to speak, reparations, if you want to call it that. The attempt to make it whole, restitution, sorry, not reparations, bad choice of word. Restitution, the process of making it whole, and not only putting back what you did wrong, but then fixing what it caused. And that's a scary place to live, especially in that moment, but it's also frightening, and why so many people don't do it, when you're trying to have those thoughts from the get-go, it's very hard, especially small businesses. It's especially hard because you're already facing the challenge of starting a new business and all the things that could just go wrong. You don't get your business license, and you screw up filing your sales tax, and you screw up this, and or you don't do your taxes correctly, and then you get audited, and you could, on and on and on and on and on, to then sit down and have a whole nother conversation about where are all of our vulnerabilities? What are we vulnerable to? How can we be taken advantage of? Because that's the kind of conversation that keeps people awake at night. No one wants to have it. But it is critical. And what we should all see is that it's not just small businesses, it's not just big businesses, it's not just businesses, it's government and any entity that handles or touches our lives so frequently fails to ask those questions. And sometimes it's the realization of, even if you do, build a better mousetrap, build a better mouse.
There'll always be a better mouse.
There's always a better mouse. But anyway, moving on. That was probably more than we meant to give to this topic. But
no, it's actually a very important topic. Because, we in general are at a vulnerability. We in general get too comfortable, get too focused on what needs to happen and when it needs to happen and how it needs to happen. And we need to learn to focus on what we need in our lives and what we give companies. Like, does Marlboro really need to know that you were born in a certain year, or can you give them another year? They're not sending you a tax return.
Well, yeah.
All they need to know is that you're over the age of 18.
True. Well, and then the ultimate realization is, or should be, if you want to go that far, is it's only illegal to lie to an officer to mislead them, and to lie in a court of law under oath.
Right.
But what's the life impact?
Right.
It's very, very dangerous to go down that road. You start lying,
Mm-hmm.
That's a very dangerous place.
Mm-hmm.
Not only do you have to keep all those lies straight, but you could find yourself in very frightening situations if you can't remember the lie. Marlboro cigarettes, the worst thing that happens is, they close down your account if they find out, or they don't give you coupons, or you can't use them, or you can't get into your account to get them. Like, there's some situations there. It's annoying and whatever. But once you do that, then it's like, where else are you going to lie? And what kind of lies? And to what extent are you going to lie or exaggerate? Or are you going to do that on a credit card form or a loan document? And if you do, then what's the cost of those lies? Because ultimately, ends up in a place, once you do it, and you get comfortable giving that false information out because you're trying to protect your privacy, it becomes ever increasingly easier for you to then turn around and see the advantages of giving false or misleading information without repercussion or without serious repercussion, which can kind of create a complacency. You lied to Marvel and no one cares. You lied to, this place and no one cared. And you lied to this one and that one and this other one and these three and that four, and then, you needed a credit card. And you start making these justifications for why it's okay to make that lie.
Right.
And so then you lie on a credit card app, or you lie on a loan document, or you lie on this and you lie on that. And suddenly there's big repercussions. You lie on your taxes, big repercussions. You lie on a credit card application, big repercussions. Don't ever do it. You lie, all those places you start screwing with your finances and you start not telling the truth. And you basically end up in that Donald Trump situation. Not saying that he lied on his taxes, but the lady doth protest too much for someone who told all the truth.
Well, she passed protest too much. Like, we're what? 7 years into this? Can we just be done with it? Shipping to, Uruguay.
Well,
Indonesia has an open bedroom now.
Well, there you go. Ecuador.
Send him there.
Yeah. I'm sure the Ecuadorian embassy would totally exchange Assange for Trump. I'm sure they would be thrilled by the concept.
Mm-hmm.
I just slap Trump Tower on the side of it, they'd be thoroughly kicked off.
Probably, but let him, let a murderer, rapist, stay for what, 12 years? Well, 2000, almost 6 years.
Well, I might have missed murderer. Well, okay, you could probably extrapolate that. Anyone who died as a consequence of his leaks. Okay, got you there. Sorry, I was having a moment. I was like, murderer I missed. But okay, I could see that. Anyone who is murdered or potentially could have been puts him in that category. He was very reckless and careless with the truth. Kind of the flip side of, you know, if you're not careful with your lies, it can be just as bad, if not worse, than not being careful with the truth. There's only so much. One, there's only so many lies the world can take, and there's only so many truths the world can take. Knowing the difference of when to tell one versus the other, probably the whole definition of what 42 meant in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Because it is a balancing act. It is almost a mathematical equation. You know, because there are times in life one should lie. There are also times in life one should really tell the truth. Ultimately, you know, we do have to navigate that. That's probably one of the biggest conundrums of humanity, and especially for those who, and offhand, I'm not going to remember which particular mental differences of ability this impacts, but because I want to say autism, but I may be totally wrong. It is people that have problems with, you know, black and white thinking, who don't see the shades of gray in between, that are compulsively honest or even compulsively dishonest, such as a compulsive liar. For those people, that's a really hard concept for them to wrap their head around. Is that, yes, there are times it's okay to fudge the truth or omit the truth, or let's just not go there. You know, maybe now's not the right time. You know, or the old husband standard of, does this make me look fat? The answer is always no. You know, but then there's the flip side, is sometimes in sparing someone's feelings, we set them up for a bigger disappointment. And that's a tough thing. It's one of the biggest struggles, and we so horribly prepare people for it. Can I point that out? We so horribly prepare people for that one. Because we start as little kids, and the first thing we are told is, you know, you must always tell the truth. That's not quite correct. You know, sometimes the better part of valor is living to fight another day. You really have to gauge, is this an appropriate time to be completely, totally, 100% honest? Maybe not. Maybe you have to fudge the details just a little so that you're not completely dishonest, but you didn't quite say everything you thought, because sometimes you just really shouldn't. But within that, it is. It's probably the hardest part of being an adult. You will run into it in every aspect of your life. You know, sometimes you just got to play with the reality. And remember that reality is just our agreement as to what we're all seeing. And probably the biggest test of that is the Trump presidency.
You know, the Trump president in general was idiotic thing. I'm just waiting for the show to be canceled. It's like most reality TV. I didn't like it.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
But no, it does. His supporters are straddling a line between shared delusion and creating basically an alternate reality. Because ultimately reality is nothing more than what we all agree is true. If there's enough of us that agree, then that could be reality.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that's always turned out for the best, Salem witch trials, but it
There's a
doesn't
bit of few cases
necessarily
of that.
separate us. Yeah, it's not that it necessarily separates it from being an option.
Right.
You know, it's a very fine line between shared delusion and, you know, alternative reality. They're not necessarily the same thing, because if enough people accept a thing as reality, then
Right.
it becomes reality.
Right.
But there we are. And, yeah. But I get a strong feeling we need to move on to topic 2.
Well, we need to move on to the different topics. It kind of caused me a little pause.
You're going to chew on that one until next week.
No.
You're going to chew on that one until next week. Okay. Oh, okay.
No, let's talk about the introduction to protect GBLT kids from child abuse. And I'm really looking at this going, what? We need protection. We need a good bit of protection.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, can we get them to enforce the base laws? There's already a ton of child protective laws out there. You know, you can't do that.
There are.
You're supposed to be, you know, you're supposed to go to jail if you kick your child out before age 18, yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm. Well, but that's also part of what this would encompass. It's not just really saying let's create a whole separate class of laws. That may potentially be a component down the road. One of the biggest things is understanding what's going on, which for many people it's kind of like, well, duh. You know, you have a group of people that are one way or another custodian of a child or responsible for their care or treatment or whatever as they go through this giant system. And ultimately, somewhere in there exists a prejudice against them, and as a result, they fall into a category of abuse and neglect at a much higher rate. For many people, I'm sure it's like, well, duh, you know, maybe be careful who you put in charge of these kids, or be careful, you know, but ultimately there's a failure here. There's an ultimate massive failure that's allowing a specific group of kids. Like, there's a majority, hopefully this is what this implies. It's the happy reality I wish to live in. Speaking of alternate realities, where the majority of kids are going through this process, this system, this thing, are getting the help they need, are not falling into cracks, are not being put through further abuse and neglect, or abuse and neglect at all, and are coming out on the other side absolutely okay. Or as okay as that portion of it could be. And but then there's this other group that's really clearly identifiable, because they're sticking out like sore thumbs over here, that are not having that same experience. And so part of what it looks to do is identify, why is that happening? What can we do to fix that, or prevent that, or help alleviate that? And then moving with that to get those numbers in line. So that it's not like, I believe this quoted 3.8 times more likely to face sexual abuse, and 1.2 times more likely to face parental physical abuse.
Right. And I'm sure those numbers are even higher.
Well, yeah, when you start factoring in abuse is often, and especially sexual abuse, is often underreported, or so, at least so we've been told, and I can buy that one. There are a lot of people that's like, this is a thing, it happened to me, I'm going to forget it, and keep. Side note to that doesn't ever work. It doesn't. It just doesn't. And then there's also a different alternative there. So this is a dangerous category, but, and I don't mean to be flippant, but the words that come to my mind are flippant. One person's abuse may inadvertently be someone else's not abuse. We'll go with that. They either, and there's a couple of explanations for that. Sometimes you can be so abused or be mistreated in so many different ways, you can't even acknowledge abuse. You don't see yourself as having value or worth or anything like that you deserve something different, because everything about your life has told you that this is all you deserve, to where you don't register abuse. A secondary situation is sometimes the abuse is better than the other abuse that you came from. One's tolerable, one's not. And for others, there's a massive debate as to whether or not, this is the ugly one. This is the one that I struggle even trying to entertain sometimes, the idea, is that even if it's technically illegal, like let's say sexually abusing a minor, there's a situation in which that minor was a willing participant. Let's put it that way. I'm struggling for words on this one because I'm trying really hard not to say enjoyed it. Because that's not even true sometimes.
Let's kind of clarify that.
That's not what it is.
Well,
okay.
Right. Let's clarify that. Whereas the minor, 18 years of age, goes into having a consensual relationship with somebody, or consensual sex with somebody. And we see this all the time. And this is where sidebar, my thoughts on a lot of this is we need to get real with ourselves when it comes to sexual behaviors, sexual adulthood, heck, adulthood in general. It should not be that hard for a child who is consciously thinking, consciously making decisions, consciously moving forward and, living their life, not to be able to be seen as an adult or not to be able to be seen as, being able to have adult status. A 16-year-old that's living in their own, go for it.
Yeah, like an emancipated minor. And I think what you're referring to is something that I would more aptly describe. It's lip switch. It's a dimmer. You don't turn 18 and, 1 minute later you're an adult. Like, you have it all together. You've got a full-time stable job. You totally have your act together. You're an adult. Whereas a minute before you turned 18, you're totally a child, you totally don't have a clue, you're totally not responsible, you're completely, utterly incapable of adult choices, or dealing with adult themes, let's call it.
Right.
And I do, to an extent, agree with that. But I don't know, and while I know that makes for a nice, pretty hot topic in debating those concepts, there's the obvious exploitations, or what should be obvious exploitations that sometimes are not quite as obvious. And again, especially for someone who comes from a very abusive environment. Again, going back to the concept, you can be so abused, you kind of stop registering it. It's sort of like you can be so in pain, you just stop registering pain. You black out. I forget what the word is. There's blacking out, but then there's also like the adrenaline rush, where you stop feeling pain. There's something else that can happen.
Euphoria.
Euphoria, trance states, all of this. I think, one, we have to acknowledge that. That's probably a big component of this for the unreported, on the underreported side. Then there's also, it's a dimmer, not a flip switch, as to really having to look at the situation. And while I don't think you can broad spectrum this, and I think that's what we've tried to do legally, is broad spectrum, is that we're going to treat a newborn who is sexually assaulted just about the same as someone who is 17 years, 11 months, and 29 days old. That's a big difference.
For me, it's a multi-level problem. First of all, let's all agree the child welfare system is not broken. It's past broken. If it was a building, it would be condemned. We have more children now in foster care that need to be. We have children aging out of foster care that don't even have the basics. We have one worker with 50 to 100 cases that she's supposed to see every freaking week. So we have that issue. Then we have children who are being abused, who are being taken advantage of, who are being, child labor. Let's not even look at it sexually. Let's look at child labor. Let's look at children who adult every day. 12 and 13-year-olds, 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds sitting up every day. They go to school, they go home, they go to work, whatever they're doing, and are operating as adults, but don't have the same equal protection as adults.
Right. Well, and there's another category to slip right in there. There's also the kids that are literally a check. As in, that's all they're either their legal guardian, whomever that may be, parent or otherwise, foster parent, adoptive parent. It's a check.
Right.
It's a check. Fostering kids to pay the bills. Here's your 69-cent can of tomato soup, generic store brand per day, if that. It basically indentured servitude. Go pick up the kid, work them on the farm, whatever. Feed them as little as possible, throw them in an adequate shelter, care nothing about the child, and and there are cases of that. It's an across the board concept. And I think the one that got me most recently, and this is kind of a side note, and I know we're running short on time.
We're good on time.
There was I believe it was an Amber Alert. 18-year-old goes to school, doesn't come home.
Right.
This is totally right now being treated as if, this high school student, because she's actively enrolled, high school student, is a ninth grader who got off the bus in the morning at school and then never came home.
Right.
No, she's legally an adult. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to agree with her decisions. You don't have to like her decisions, but she's allowed to make them. Now, are there consequences for those decisions? Absolutely. But ultimately, at the end of the day, she left school wherever she wanted to as an adult.
Right. Right.
And I struggle. I get the mother's pain. I totally get the mother's pain. I do. I get it. She doesn't know where her daughter is. She is total mama bear right now. She doesn't know what's going on. She wants to know where her daughter is. She wants her safely home. One way or another, that daughter is not there. Now, whether that's because the daughter willingly went somewhere else or that daughter was forced there, at the end of the day, this is different than a child abduction. And they keep running it like a child abduction. This, at worst, is an abducted adult. But they're still treating it, acting like this is an abducted adult. Sort of like if I were enrolled in college right now and I took off to my college class one morning and didn't come home, and you were just absolutely devastated, my student didn't come home from school today. I'm 36 years old. I'll go wherever I please. Thank you very much. If I don't want to come back here, I won't. That's the reality. I can do that. I'm an adult. I can make that choice. Now, are there consequences? Absolutely. Absolutely. But at the same time, treating me like I'm some, 5-year-old who, didn't get off the bus, totally different.
Right.
Totally different. She's not a 5-year-old that didn't get off the bus. She's not a 10-year-old who didn't get off the bus. She's not even a 17-year-old who didn't get off the bus or drive home. She's an 18-year-old.
This is an 18-year-old.
She gets to make choices. Yeah.
Right.
Ultimately.
Well,
but
ultimately.
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts, because for ages now, and this is, just life experience and seeing kids and working with kids and working with adults and working with young adults and working with, heck, having friends and everything else and going, okay, you're not even qualified to be an adult. And then looking at kids and going, okay, you're overly qualified to be an adult. When you're making more money than your parent on your own, when you're cooking your own meals, when you're taking care of your own food, why shouldn't you be able to make adult decisions?
Yes. Well, and even recently, and I read this one, and I should have shared it, and I wasn't even thinking of it in connection at the time. Claire's, the store in the mall. It's in your mall. It's always in the mall. It's in every mall. Claire's, the little, tween paradise of, bright colors and, Lisa Frank vomited, has come under fire for their parental consent policy. They required parental consent to do ear piercing. It's one of the big things they always advertise. There's a great big sign, for ear piercing. Okay.
Right.
This employee is supposed to be piercing this kid's ears. This kid isn't just like, I'm afraid, or is how bad's it going to hurt, or I don't know that I want to because I'm afraid it's going to hurt, but once their ears pierced, this is a kid who is like, no, I don't want my ears pierced. Mommy, please don't make me do this. I don't want to. I don't want her touching me. And this employee is like, I don't want to do this. Like, this is beyond the normal, like, this kid's uncomfortable. This kid does not consent. And got told by her manager, store policy is, we don't care about the kid, we care about the parent. Whatever the parent wants to do, we do. Parent wants their kid's ears pierced, we pierce the kid's ears. So this employee goes on to say, or to ask her manager, so you're telling me that if we had a kid come in who had to be physically restrained to have their ears pierced, I'm supposed to keep going and do what the parent says and ignore the child. And the manager said, yep, that's what you do. So she quit her job. She wrote a letter that has since gone viral to the company about how absolutely insane this was. And the company has taken a moment to step back and go, not what we should have, like, we understand where the manager got that. We understand what you're saying. We've got to fix this. We have to fix this because you're right. This is wrong. This is not how this should work. That if that kid is absolutely adamantly does not want their ears pierced, don't pierce their ears. But there's a lot of people, you know, we see it with circumcision, we see it with ear piercing, things done to children as babies. They're not consenting. They don't even know. What is consent? What is the concept of consent? What is the idea of consent? You know, circumcision is not a nice, peaceful experience for a child. Ear piercing on a baby is usually not a nice, quiet, peaceful experience for the child.
Right.
They're not, like, they don't even have the language ability to technically register no. They cry. That's no.
Right.
This hurts. I don't understand. Why are you hurting me?
Right.
But even in those situations, it's all about the parent and what the parent wants for the child. And so much of what we do assumes that from conception to 18, it is all about the parent, regardless of the child. Now, are there areas that we've re-examined? There are. I know that there are at least some states that do not require parental consent for, say, pregnancy testing or abortion. I believe that still holds true. That you can be like 15 pregnant and go get an abortion. I think that still exists. I don't know. I may have missed it. I think there's a few places you can do that. There are some states that
there's very few.
Parental consent.
And the whole parent must consent for the ear piercing thing, that isn't a clear policy. That is a, what's that board I hate? Health and Safety or whatever board.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually
County Board of
that's
Health.
their policy. Yes, that is actually the Federal Board of Health.
Well, here's the problem. It's 10:59.
Do what?
It's 10:59.
I know. We'll dig into this a little bit later. Talk to you next week. Bye, y'all.
Choosing a psychic is hard, and you don't want to waste time finding one that's right for you. You've thought about calling into the show, but you want more privacy than that? With services from phone, email, chat, text, and his network availability, you need to check out Aeson's website at aesonnight.com. Just a few clicks and you can have your own personal, private psychic reading. On aesonnight.com, you can also find out about VIP packages, scheduling parties and events, and signing up for his classes. What are you waiting for? Talk to Aeson today. You're listening to the Psychic Coffee Shop Podcast Network.